I'm going to show you the simplest way to manage your money in your business to build real wealth. In this video, I'm going to show you the very system that I wish I had when I first started my business more than 20 years ago, because if I had this, I would actually have something to show for my early days. Now, my name is Yuri. I'm the CEO and founder of Healthpreneur. We help health professionals build world-class coaching businesses that transform their lives. And it's hard to do that if your business makes no money, and worse, if you make money, but you actually have nothing to show for it. I don't know about you, but I have nothing to show for the early jobs that I had way back in my late teens and early 20s. I never grew up with any type of money management education. My parents didn't teach me about this stuff. And so essentially I would make $1 and spend $1. I'd make whatever, I was making as a bartender and selling appliances way back in the day, and I had nothing to show for that. And then when I became a personal trainer and nutritionist, again, I was making little to nothing, and I had little to nothing to show for it many, many years later. So what I'm sharing with you here is a very simple way to manage every dollar that comes into your business so that you actually have something to show for it, and you manage the different requirements in terms of cash flow that your business has, so you're not just like burning money left, right, and center. And you have a very simple way to manage every dollar, whether it's just $1 or $1 million or more or anywhere in between. So here, I'm going to share this on the screen with you. I'm actually going to give you the sheets below this video as my free gift to you. And it's a really simple tool you can use. Just go to File, make a copy, and then obviously you can play with this. So this is something I use on a weekly basis in my business. I've been using this for the past couple of years. And once again, I wish I had done this way, way back in the day, because I think I'd be a little bit better off and not having, dealt with 3 years of poverty line income, being massively in debt, and all that kind of stuff. So I went from that in my late 20s to 31 to becoming a deca millionaire by the time I was 41. So what I'm sharing with you here, it works. Now, what this is not going to do is it's not going to make you more money. Like, you actually have to go out and make money. But when the money comes into your bank, this is going to make a huge difference for you. Now, before we dive in any further, I do want to give kudos where kudos is due. Two inspirations from this initially was T. Harv Eker. Way back in the day, one of the first personal development seminars I ever went to introduced me to this concept of having different buckets that money comes into. And that was the first time I started to think about something like this. Second, shout out goes to Mike Michalowicz. An amazing book he has called Profit First was kind of a reinforcement of what I had initially learned from T. Harv Eker with respect to managing money as it comes into your business. So I just want to give props where props are due. And this is kind of like my rendition of, that type of concept. Okay, so let me dive into this. And again, just a couple things. Now, number one, I've set this up, as you can see, on a weekly basis, right? So every single Monday, I call this money moves. Like, this is going to be like, put it in your calendar as an item to do. Okay. So you're going to take 10 minutes on a Monday and you're going to do your money moves. And essentially what you're going to look at is you're going to look at the previous 7 days of all deposits that came into your bank accounts. And then what you're going to do is you're going to run it through this process, and then you're going to move money accordingly. Now, in order for this to make sense, you should have a couple different accounts in your bank account. So you're going to have your primary kind of reservoir, if you will. So if you have Stripe payments coming in, it's going to hit a specific bank or a specific account, okay? That's going to be your main reservoir accounts. But the thing is, you don't want to keep all your money in there. You want to be able to take that money and move it into different sub-accounts. So what I would recommend is having a minimum of 4 accounts. You don't need to go more than this. It becomes a bit overkill, perhaps. You're going to have a profit account. You're going to have a salary account. You're going to have a tax account. And then you're going to have an Opex, or operational expense account. Now, the Opex, you can break that into 2 if you want. I think payroll and then other expenses is a very simple way to break it out. So if you want to have those 2 as their own accounts, you can do that. Now, when I say their own accounts, you're going to have your main, like if you log into online banking, you have your main business account, and then you're going to have sub accounts in that account, okay? So that's what we're looking at here. So what's going to happen, let me just walk you through this. On the right-hand side, and I'll just zoom in a little bit over here. On the right-hand side, we have the quick calculator. And what this is going to do is it's going to say, okay, for every dollar that comes in, we are going to divvy up that dollar into various percentages. So I've started off with a deposit of $100,000, okay, but I'll break this down into different ways. Now, as a starting point, I'd recommend the following. Now, these percentages they're going to vary based on how much money you're making, where you're at in business, like all kinds of stuff, okay? But I think at a minimum, You as the business owner need to take minimum 10% off the top of every single dollar you make, okay? I don't care if your margins are terribly small. You have to pay yourself, not salary, but profit. Salary is your salary. Whether you pay yourself a salary or dividend, doesn't matter. That's going to be the salary component. But profit is what you, as the shareholder of your business, get for taking the risk of building and running the business. Got that? It needs to be a minimum 10%. Obviously, your business economics could allow for way more than that. And quite honestly, the purpose of business is to make a profit in the service of other people. And if you can get to a point where you're taking out 20, 30, 40, 50% without compromising the health of your business, then by all means do so. But start off at 10% off the top. Salary, again, I just put in 20%, but again, I take out less than 3% of our revenue as my personal salary, okay? So, but it depends. When you're starting off, if you're making $10,000 a month, 3% is $300. So you got to look at where you're at revenue-wise and what is going to make sense for your personal salary. So when I say salary, I mean you're taking this money out of the business, whether that's paid to you as salary or dividends. You can obviously talk with your accountants about that. It doesn't matter to me. But this is the money you are personally taking out to pay for your mortgage or rent, your car payments, your kids, your food, all the personal stuff. I'm not an accountant, but my personal recommendation is this. Take out as little as you need to live comfortably personally. I like to live broke. So I don't take out a lot of money. I don't take out, relative to some, obviously might be a lot, but I take out exactly what I need to cover all of my personal expenses and a little bit more for buffer. That's it. I don't want to take out more than that because then I'm going to pay excess tax for keeping money in my personal accounts, which it's not even an efficient way to use my money. So I want to keep as much money in the business as possible. At least, to keep it simple. I don't want to take out a lot personally. I don't think it makes a lot of sense. Anyways, so you're going to want to figure out what that percentage is for you. Tax, this is a big one too. I don't know about you, but I don't like getting hit with a massive tax bill that I was not expecting at the end of the year. That should not happen if you're on top of your numbers. But when you have this type of system in place, even if you were to get hit with an unexpected tax bill, you're ready for it. Because if you think about this, so what I'm saying here is a minimum 20% into tax off the top of every dollar. You are taxed corporately. Now, again, every corporate structure is a bit different. I'm talking just general concept here. You will get taxed on the difference between revenue and expenses. Okay, so if you make $100,000 and your expenses are $50,000, you will get taxed on the $50,000 difference, which is profit. Depending on where you are, what country, what state, that corporate tax could be little to nothing or a lot. But generally, like in Ontario, Canada, where I am, basically for me, it's about 24% corporate tax. So when I look at the net income, which is the bottom line profit of my company, and I look at, okay, well, if it's 24% on that, if I took 20% off top line, I will have more than enough reserve to cover taxes, whether that's through installments or as one lump sum at the end of the year. So I think in my experience, 20% is a very, very healthy number. Now, again, if you're in a state or jurisdiction where your tax rate corporately is little to nothing, maybe that percentage is lower. But by taking it right off the top, you ensure you always have more than enough because it doesn't matter what your margins are at the end of the day. You're taking it off top line revenue, which is essentially gives you way more buffer than if you waited for your P&L statements and bottom line profit and then you move money around. Just take it off every dollar right off the top, okay? 20% I think is a healthy place. Finally, the biggest chunk is going to be Opex, operating expenses. 50% typically would go to this. And then again, I've broken this down into payroll and or other expenses. If you don't have a team, guess what? Your payroll might be zero. Okay, so this is payroll outside of your own salary. So notice you've got salary here. This is your salary and payroll down here, which is team payroll. If you have one person, if you have 100 people, it's going to depend. Generally, it doesn't matter how big your team is, you want to be looking for a payroll of no more than 30% of your revenue. If you're paying more than 30% in payroll relative to revenue, you're overpaying, or you're not getting the most out of your team members to get more revenue and profitability in the business. So here's what you can do. is once you have a copy of the sheets, you're going to notice that these cells have formulas. You can change these formulas. Like you can see here, salary equals L2, which is this number up here, times 0.2 for 20%. So if you decide to pay, if your salary is 10%, just change the number to 0.1. Okay, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to keep these percentages as they are. You can certainly change the formulas as you see fit for your situation. So let's look at how this works. Let me zoom out a little bit here. Okay, so let's say that on a Monday, Monday morning, you have the deposits over the past 7 days come into your bank, and it was $100,000. Okay, so let's just assume that was what it was. Right away, all you do is you change the number up here. So if this was $1, just watch how these numbers change, right? Like, obviously it's not much. If you put in $100, the numbers change. If you put in $1,000, the numbers change accordingly, etc. So we're going to say $100,000. So what you're going to do is you're going to say, okay, I had $100,000 come in on Monday, July 15th in this case. The profit, I'm literally just taking this number, $10,000 over here. My salary was $20,000 over there. Tax is $20,000. Opex is $50,000, but 15 of that is going to be payroll. 35,000 is going to go into other expenses. So like in our case, all of our expenses run off an Amex. And so in our case, the other here is basically like that money is going to pay the Amex off several times a week because we run some very high numbers. So in my case, I do this twice a week. I do this Mondays and Thursdays because we have so much turnover in terms of cash flow and expenses that we have to make sure that things are paid off quickly. But in most cases, every week is fine. So you can see here, $35,000 of the 50 is going to be put into miscellaneous or other expenses. So that can be your ad spend, that can be tech platforms, whatever it is, okay? Now, as you look at these numbers, you're like, well, I don't need to take out $20,000 in a week for salary. I mean, like, okay, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But again, you can certainly adjust the percentages over here, and then therefore these numbers would reflect that. But the key thing here is building the habit of doing this. Because the cool thing is that also over here, you'll be able to track this. So this chart or this graph down here you'll see this kind of line chart over time, and you can actually track your revenue as these bank deposits are coming in. So if you have 100,000, I'll just quickly show you this. So let's say we did 100,000, 120,000, 130,000, 150,000, 170,000. You're going to see down here, this is all going to start to trend, right? You're going to have this beautiful bar graph that's going to happen over time. And so it's nice to see retroactively how your business is growing as you move through this process. So that's what you got to do. So again, I'm just using the example of $100,000. Maybe it's less, maybe it's more for you, but that's the key. It's a super, super simple process. Now, what you're going to do from this is you are going to have these buckets, these sub-accounts in your bank account. So you have the primary reservoir, which is going to have received $100,000 over the previous 7 days. Okay, so that's, let's say, account number one. From that, you're going to have a second account, a third account, a fourth account, a fifth account, and maybe a sixth account. So maybe you've got 6 sub-accounts in your main bank account. And what you're going to do is from that reservoir, you're going to take 10,000 and you're going to send it into the profit account. You're going to take 20,000, you're going to send it across to the salary account. You're going to take another 20,000, you're going to send it to the tax account. 15,000, you can put into your payroll account, and then 35,000 into your main expenses account, okay? And so every Monday, you're just moving money. You're like, you don't need to outsource this stuff. You are your own money manager. And all you're doing here is you're making sure that when 100,000 comes in, you don't blow it or you don't allocate it appropriately. Like if you forget to put aside money for tax, guess what? Like you're still going to have to pay tax. So this builds fiscal discipline, financial discipline, which most entrepreneurs, myself included, initially do not have. But I've become maniacal about this stuff over the past couple of years because I just went through so much pain of seeing money slip through the cracks and blowing it and doing stupid stuff and not paying attention to this stuff. It's not worth it, okay? So once you have moved the money, what you're going to come into in the status column is you're going to hit complete, and it's going to turn green. And then you're just going to keep doing this every week. And then you're just going to look down and you're going to see a lot of completes. Every time you type complete, it's going to turn green. So it just shows you visually like, cool, I've moved my money. I've done what I need to do. Super simple. Now, if you want to do something beyond that, like if you wanted to send installments to the government for your tax payments, then you can just literally have this tax account like every week or every month. Like you just take that money, boom, you just send the installment to CRA if you're in Canada or the IRS in the States. So these tax accounts, right, will be fairly fluid because you can send installments or you can like let everything accumulate over time. But here's the danger. And this is the final thing I'll mention. If you let this money sit in a bank account that you have access to at the click of a button, it can be very tempting. Like let's say that the amount you had in the tax account over 6 months was $250,000. And then you went through a week or two where things were a bit slow or you wanted to buy something, and then you're looking at your bank account and you see $250,000 in there, and you're thinking to yourself, what if I took out $40,000 to do this thing? And now you start pulling from this account with this money sitting there. Now we start to get into, again, bad habits financially, which is why I think if you're like, environment will trump willpower. Okay. What I mean by that is if you have a lot of money sitting in a bank account that you can click and just send money from, you're better off not having that money in there. And so I think what for a lot of people makes a lot of sense is to dump your tax account on a monthly basis. Just send installments to the government. So you don't have this huge lump sum of money sitting in your bank that you could otherwise just pull from. And then you're like, yeah, I'll pay it back later. And then you're like, shit, I forgot to do that. The same thing with your profit account. Think of your profit account as the tax you pay yourself for running the business. If you have this profit money sitting in your bank, sitting in your company, and let's say that your profit, I'm just going to bring this down to 20,000 again. Let's say that over the course of a year, your profit sitting in the bank is $150,000, and you're thinking of hiring someone, right? And you're like, oh man, like it's a bit tight. I really want to bring this person on. I've got, they're going to cost me $100,000. Where am I getting $100,000 from? Well, you don't need to pay them in cash right away, first and foremost. But if you look at your bank and you're like, hey, I've got $150,000 profit. Maybe I could just borrow from this and then pay myself back. Don't do that, okay? So what I would recommend, and again, I'm not your tax or legal counsel here, is have some type of structure. Like in my case, we have, or like, if you're savvy within Canada, for instance, you'll have an operating company and then a holding company. And then you can send profit between the operating company and the holding company tax-free. So you can take the profit out of the business and then just send it to a separate account or a separate entity. And then that money is gone. Like it's yours, but it's out of the operating company. And therefore, instead of you seeing $150,000 sitting in your operating company, you see zero, right? And then maybe next month it's $20,000. End of the month, boom, you just send that $20,000 to yourself. And again, it's zero, okay? Otherwise, it's very tempting to dip into what you have sitting there, which you don't want to start doing because then you'll have nothing to show for all your hard work. Final thing I'll mention is looking at Opex, okay? Now, you have to look at these percentages and these percentages might change. Like you might find yourself initially you're like 50%, I can't cover all my expenses with 50%. So guess what? Maybe your salary comes down a little bit. Don't touch your profit. Keep minimum 10%. Do not touch the profit going lower. If anything, it goes higher. But let's say you can't cover your expenses with only 50% going to Opex. And after doing this a couple of weeks, you're like, man, like, shit, if I put 15% into this, I'm not even gonna have enough money to cover the tax portion, right? I can't cover my operating expenses with just 50%. So two things. Number one, maybe your business is too expensive and therefore needs to become more efficient at producing revenue relative to expenses. Or if you have the opportunity and you need to temporarily, you change the percentage of the operating expense account from 15% to maybe 60% until you're at a point where the business generates more revenue and you can bring this back down if that's the right proportion. I don't care how you do this. Like you can change this on a monthly basis if you need to. The most important part of this is the habit of doing this. This is something I've shared with my kids, not to this degree, but for instance, with my kids, they know that for every single dollar they make, half of it comes to me. I put it into our investments. And what happens is right off the bat, they know that every single time a dollar comes in, 50% is being invested, 50% they can do whatever they want with. And I'm getting them into this habit where I don't care if they get $15 for birthday money or they mow someone's lawn and make $20, they know off the bat, half of it is going away for savings investments. And it's building the habit and the skill early on because it's very hard. It's a mindset, okay? If you're not willing to split $1, you're not going to be willing to split $1 million. I promise you this, okay? This seems easy to do on small numbers and harder to do on big numbers, but it's the habit of doing so that it's not even a consideration as your revenue grows. So this is how I would strongly recommend as a business owner, you manage every dollar that comes into your business. If you do this over the coming years, you will build a tremendous amount of financial responsibility and discipline. You will always have enough to cover everything you need. And most importantly, you'll actually have something to show for you, profit-wise, from all the hard work you're putting into your business. Again, if you want a copy of this sheet, you can download it below this video. If you've enjoyed this video, the only thing I ask is that you share this with someone else who's a business owner, ideally a health professional, who could use this in their own business. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, come back to YouTube so you can download this sheet and put it to use for yourself. Thanks again, guys. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. There are 12 ways that rich people think differently than most everyone else. And in this video, I'm going to share with you that millionaire mindset so you can adopt it for you and your life.